السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll start with the tafsir of Surah As-Saaffat. Surah As-Saaffat, Surah number 37. Surah number 37 after Surah Yasin. Surah As-Saaffat. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit of what we're hearing. And as we just talked about how the importance of to reflect upon the Quran and to give the time to understand the book of Allah. This is the real life of this world, is to be upon the Quran, is to give the effort to go through the Quran. And ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the sincerity and the devotion. And no matter what time we give to the Quran, we will see that we need far more than one's lifetime. It's the speech of Allah. Nothing is the like of it. So it gets better and better the more we get to know the Quran. And the ilm of it, the knowledge of it is not going to end. It makes you want to know more and more. And no one get himself into busy with the Quran unless they wish they did that earlier. And the more they live, the more they want to do more. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit, inshallah. So we'll go through, inshallah, the first 5 verses only. The Surah As-Saaffat is a Mecca surah, was revealed in Mecca. The verses are, in general, short verses, and it's 182 verses. And it was said that it was revealed after Surah Al-An'am. After Surah Al-An'am. It was said to be revealed after Surah Al-An'am. And again, as you said, it's not necessarily something that is authentic, but it was said to be after Surah Al-An'am. And Surah Al-Mulk was revealed after it. Surah Al-Mulk was revealed after it. And it's called As-Saaffat. And this is how it's named at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. There's no authenticity about any other name to it. Even in some of the books of Ulum al-Quran, they might name it Surah Al-Dhabih, the Surah of Al-Dhabih, the slaughtered one. But there's no evidence of that whatsoever. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the name of the surah, or what's mentioned in the very first ayah, As-Saaffat Saffa. And that's what the first ayah is that mentions As-Saaffat, and we'll talk about the meaning of it. Which is something related to the birds, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swear by His creation. The objectives of the surah briefly is to establish the oneness of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's so many evidences in the surah, and the entire Quran is about the Tawheed of Allah, that He is the one, He's the only creator to all of this amazing creation of Allah, and therefore He's the only one worthy of worship. And the more people exalt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more then they would see that He's the only one worthy of worship. And also the surah talks about the hereafter and the resurrection and the recompense and the reward and punishment, which is always the case with the surahs that were revealed in Mecca, and explaining the affairs of the disbelievers and what's going to happen to them in the Day of Judgment, and how they will be cursing and being against one another versus the believers, and how they would remind one another of what they used to be in this world and things like this. And then to establish also the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ, calling his people by the message of the messengers before him, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave victory to the messengers before, and to see the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth and the struggle between the truth and falsehood, and mentioning some of the great characteristics of the prophets of Allah, and how Allah gave them strength in the religion of Allah, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved them from the difficulties that they faced for the sake of Allah. And especially the Ismail alayhi salam, when his story is mentioned with Ibrahim alayhi salam, as part of that stories which is mentioned in details in the surah. And how evil is some of the beliefs of the disbelievers, and some of the evil claims Like when they claim that the angels are the daughters of Allah, that's why they would kill their daughters. And what they say about the Prophet ﷺ and the Quran and things like this. The promise of Allah is mentioned. And the beginning of the surah gives that, understanding of the swearing by the angels and the like of that, which shows again one of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and some of the characteristics that are there, as we would see inshallah ta'ala. So let's start inshallah ta'ala with the first 5 verses only, and we continue and take it from there, and also have the intentions inshallah to try to memorize these verses, and it's easy surah inshallah ta'ala. But we'll start with the recitation, so repeat after me inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصافات صفا فالزاجرات زجرا فالتاليات ذكرا إن إلهكم لواحد رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما ورب المشارق والصافات صفا. This mad is 6 counts, longer than the normal 4 to 5 counts, because it has an alif and then after that a shadda, a letter with shadda, like ولا الضالين. It's 6 counts. So this is 6 counts. 6 counts. والصافات صفا. And you make the fa with a shadda, but you don't stay there, but it's 2 letters, one with sukun and one with a fatha. صفا. Of course, we stop at the end of the verse, but if you continue, then it's ikhfa. If you say صفا fa, that's ikhfa. But it's better to stop at the end of every verse, as the Prophet ﷺ used to do. فَالزَّاجِرَاتِ زَجَ. Jim with sukun makes qalqala. زَجْرَا. فَالزَّاجِرَاتِ زَجْرَا. And the ra is heavy. فَالتَّالِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا. فَالتَّالِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا. Easy, and the kaf is no qalqala there, just dhikra. Inna ilahakum lawahid. Inna, nun shadda takes 2 counts. Ilahakum lawahid. Rabbu samawati and wahid at the end, the dal with qalqala. Rabbu samawati wal ardi wa ma baynahuma wa rabbul mashariqa. The qaf here at the end with qalqala. Mashariqa. So when we look at the first ayah, and the verses here talks about some characteristics as we see inshallah ta'ala. The first one is by those ranged in ranks or rows. And then it continues with the same characteristics describing something. So who are as-Saaffat Saffa? Those who are ranged in ranks or rows. It was said to be the angels. It was said to be the angels, as Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he said. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing by the angels in when they are in state of ibadah, and how they are maintained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this amazing creation of Allah, the angels. وَالصَّافَّاتِ صَفًّا, when they're ranged in rows in the service, in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. They're being obedient to Allah, and it stretches its wings, waiting for the commands of Allah. And as Al-Hasan Al-Basri rahimahullah, he said, صَفَّ لِصُفُوفِهِمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ. They are standing in rows in salah, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ, he would say, أَلَا تَصُفُّونَ كما تصف الملائكة عند ربهم. He would say it to the people when he was straighten the rows in the salah. Shouldn't you make your rows like the angels they make rows by the Lord? So they said to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, وكيف تصف الملائكة عند ربهم? How the angels they make their rows or arrange their rows with the Lord? The Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said, يتمون الصفوف المتقدمة ويتراصون في الصف, which means they fill in the rows in front of them, like the first row is full before they go to the next row and so on. They don't leave spaces in the front rows while they're standing in the back rows. And this is how we are in the masajid. The first row should be filled and then the second row and so on. A person should not come and start another row when there's space in front of him row. ويترصون في الصف. ويترصون. Taras is when you put things right next to each other, no gaps in between. ويترصون like a brick wall. They would be one after the other, no gaps in between. And this is how the Prophet ﷺ would make the people stand in the salah, and he would remind them that this is like the ways of the angels. So we'll talk about the linguistics of it. So this is with regards to the angels. Some said, as Ibn Kathir and others, they said it refers to at-tayr, or the birds. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَى الطَّيْرِ فَوْقَهُمْ صَافَّاتٍ. Don't they see the birds, or in general above them, صَافَّات, ranged in rows, the way that they spread their wings and they fly in groups when they migrate from one place to the other. But many or most of the people of Salaf, they refer that to the angels. But also, the tayr, as it's mentioned in the other verse, it's something for us to reflect upon. So وَالصَّافَّاتِ صَفًّا, how they are arranged in rows. فَالزَّاجِرَاتِ زَجْرًا, which means, and also by those who drive the clouds in a good way, also refers to the angels. فَالزَّاجِرَاتِ زَجْرًا, they يَزْجُرُونَ السَّحَابَ, and other than the sahab, they push away the clouds, and other than the clouds by the command of Allah. So they when they do things according to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some said with regards to the ayat of the Quran, that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala zajr is when you forbid someone from something, or you show the evil of something. So they do the same thing with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed the evil of in the Quran. So this is, again, if it refers to the angels as well. فَالزَّاجِرَاتِ زَجْرًا فَالتَّالِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا. فَالتَّالِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا, which means by those also who bring the book and the Quran from Allah to mankind. فَالتَّالِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا, also the angels, as Abdullah ibn Abbas and others, they said. So they are in ranks, in rows in the heavens. They push away what Allah commands them to push. And they فَالتَّالِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا, that the angels, they bring the book and the Quran from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's like فَالْمُلْقِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا in Surah Al-Mursalat, those who bring down the dhikr of Allah. فَالتَّالِيَات refers to the reciters of the dhikr, those who recite the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why some said فَالتَّالِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا refers to the angels, and some said what has been recited in the Quran from the nations before. So what's recited unto them from the Quran from the nations before also. فَالتَّالِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا. And that also shows that for the believers to be upon at-tilawa and to recite and to benefit from what they recite and the dhikr of Allah. إِنَّ إِلَهَكُمْ لَوَاحِدٌ, indeed that your Lord is one. And this is what the qasam. Before that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing by the angels. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by His creation as signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is jawabul qasam? Swearing for what? For the fact that your Lord is, your one to be worshipped is one. Inna ilahakum. Indeed, your ilah is one. And al-ilah is basically what means of la ilaha illallah. That means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to be worshipped. And that's what ilah means. There's difference between inna rabbakum Allah, your Lord is Allah, versus inna ilahakum la wahid. Inna ilahakum la wahid, you're the one to be worshipped is one. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship. And this is basically, as we said, the jawab of al-qasam, or what the qasam is for, what the swearing is for. And the angels and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them and how they're so effective. We don't see them, and they're effective in the way that this life is conducted is by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the angels, and how they also they get affected by what's being recited and what's given to them from the commands of Allah, and they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in state of submission to Allah, because indeed your one to be worshipped, ilah, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna ilahakum lawahid, Rabbus samawati wal ardi wa ma baynahuma wa Rabbul mashariq. The Lord of the heavens and the Lords of the earth, what's between them, and He is the Lord of al-mashariq, the Lord of the as they say, the east, or the of every point of the sun's rising. All of that is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the Lord of all this. So as Imam Sa'di rahimahullah said, that means He's the creator of all of this creation, and He's the one that provides for it, and He's the one that maintains its life. So since there's no sharik, no partner with Allah in His rububiyyah, in His lordship, there's the same thing, there's no partner with Him in uluhiyyah, in worship. And this is always the case in the Quran, that Allah established the tawheed, the oneness of uluhiyyah, the oneness of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by establishing the tawheed of al-rububiyyah, by establishing the oneness of rububiyyah, of lordship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One leads to the other, one is an evidence of the other. Since the mushrikeen, they believe that Allah is the Rabb, then they, by necessity, then they should believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship. And He's the Lord of the mashariq. And the mashariq is plural, not al-mashriq. We know that there is the sunrise and sunset, but al-mashariq is the plural of sunrises. And what is meant by that is the different times of sunrise and the different places where the sun rises over, right? So the sunrise in India is different than the sunrise in America. Every, with every minute the sun is rising, and every minute the sun is set also. And the same thing with the winter versus the sun versus the summertime. And that's how the days and the short days and long days and things like this. So this is how the days of the year, every day is different sunrise. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing by the mashariq, by these different times or different sunrises. When we look at the ayat, was-Saaffat Saffa, As-Saaffat, as we said, is those who are lined up, ranked in rows, comes from Sad, Fa. You have a shadda there. And As-Saff is the row. So As-Saaffat, those who make rows. So a straight line. Inna Allah yuhibbu alladhina yuqatiluna fi sabilihi saffa. Allah loves those who fight for His sake as one row. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He described the angels, when they said, وَإِنَّا لَنَحْنُ الصَّافُونَ, it will be mentioned in the surah, that indeed we are as-Saaffun. The angels would say that about themselves. That's why the opinion here that they are the angels is what is correct. They would say we are as-Saaffun. And that's the first thing that they describe themselves, the salah, the worship of Allah. And that's, you see the hadith that we just mentioned also, how this is the characteristics of the believers, that this is always their norm. They're always standing in rows in salah in jama'ah. So the fact that once you make salah in jama'ah in the masjid 5 times a day, you're standing in rows to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like the angels, which is 5 in actions and 50 in rewards. So this is a saf, from a saf, or the row, when people are standing next to each other and they make like a straight line. Was-Saaffat Saffa. So they are saffat, and they are saffat in rows. Shows that how that is stressed, that they are standing in rows. They're making what rows is. The row is to be in straight line, and it's to be filling in the spaces in between, no spaces in between. وَالصَّافَّاتِ صَفًّا. And if this is something that Allah swears by, it shows again the importance of making straight rows in the salah without gaps in between. فَالزَّاجِرَاتِ زَجْرًا. Then, fa here is then. الزَّاجِرَات from zin, jim, ra. And a zajr is when something is being driven away. So, or pushing away something. And that's what you also make zajr to someone. That means you're condemning someone. You're forbidding an evil, as if you're pushing away that evil. Or you're scolding someone. You know, it's, as they say, zajartuhu. I stopped him. I opposed what he was upon. And also, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Nazi'at, فَإِنَّمَا هِيَ زَجْرَةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ. That it's only one zajra, the blowing the trumpet and things like this. So whether it refers to the ayah, the angels pushing away the clouds or so, and it's something that has been moved away, kicked away. And as when the disbelievers, they said about the Prophet ﷺ, وَقَالُوا مَجْنُونٌ وَازْدُجِرٌ. That means as if as they say that he's mad, and is dujir, that means he's pushed away. So فَالزَّاجِرَاتِ زَجْرًا. So they are zajirat, and they are strongly pushing away things, commands of Allah. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for a mountain to move from its place, you know, all of these things are easy for the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be established. فَالتَّالِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا. التَّالِيَات, fa also, and التاليات from ta, lam, waw. Tilawa, talin, when something follows. And that's what tilawa is, to recite, to follow what is being recited. And that's فالتاليات ذكرى, those who recite ذكرًا, the message, the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's the Quran, whether it's what has been recited unto them for them to follow. That indeed, inna ilahakum, your ilah, your Lord, but it's actually unfair to recite it as your Lord, so it's the one to be worshipped. Al-ilah is al-ma'bud al-haq, the one to be worshipped. It's from alif lam ha. When we know the root of it, it gives us the proper understanding. That is the one to be worshipped with perfect love and perfect submission. La wahid, lam here is a tawqid, indeed, for sure, is one, wahid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ilahun wahid. And as you see here, the benefit of the verses clearly, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by whatever He wills of His creation, and that's all signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us to see. And of course, Rabbul As-Samawati wal-Ardi wa ma baynahuma Rabbul Mashariq from Shin Ra Qaf. And all of that is evidences to establish the Tawheed of Allah. When we get to see the creation of Allah, whether to see the benefit of it, to see the signs of Allah, and this is the way to establish the Tawheed, La ilaha illallah. Since this is the case, then there's no one worthy of worship, as it says, إِنَّمَا إِلَهَكُمْ لَا وَاحِدٌ. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Lord of the Alameen and all that exists, with every single detail of it. Therefore, He's the only one worthy of worship. And then the verses will continue with some of the creation of Allah and some of the reality of this creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and establishing the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the heart and exalting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Barakallahu feekum. طيب. Inshallah, we'll continue next time, inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.